The Trump administration has officially shut down the 988 suicide and crisis lifeline for LGBTQ youth. This is legislation that you wrote in a program that you helped to create, and the program has received over 1.2 million crisis contacts since 2022, saving countless lives. Can you talk about the impact of it being cut? It's Haley on the Hill. Come with me as I take your questions to the halls of Congress every Tuesday.
Yeah, well, let me start with the 988 hotline to begin with. So we've long had a crisis line, a suicide prevention telephone number that people could call. And it used to be a 10-digit number, area code and then the phone number, and nobody remembered it. And at a time of crisis, you need help quickly. And so I passed bipartisan legislation that created 988 as a suicide prevention mental health crisis hotline. We knew as soon as it was fielded that a lot more people would know about it because we publicized it and reach out, and a lot more people would get help, and it would save lives. And indeed, when it finally went live in 2022, we did see a huge increase in volume in calls, and we know people were getting the help they need. And by the way, it's kind of modern in the sense that you can text it, you can chat. It's not just a traditional telephone line. 988 is meant to allow you to communicate in the way that feels best and safest for you in your time of crisis. So it's fielded, and we also recognized at the time we were implementing it that there were groups of folks who had a higher rate of suicide and crisis. Among them are U.S. military veterans, many of whom experienced trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder after their time in serving the country. And we also know that the LGBT community, particularly youth, are facing high rates of depression, feeling of isolation, feeling for good reason why they're under relentless attack politically, because that's what this administration is doing. And so when we set up 988, we set up two programs. One, to allow military veterans to identify themselves to get service in their time of crisis from the VA. Somebody, you might say, who's walked in their boots, right? They get their experience. And likewise, we created a pilot program so that people who are calling in and in a crisis and identifying as LGBTQ could get services and, an answer to their call from somebody who understood their journey in life. And so the Trevor Project took most of those calls, but there were other more local LGBTQ advocacy organizations, support organizations that also took some of the calls. And I think it's really important to have those competencies when you're dealing with somebody who's in crisis, who's considering taking their life. And if you listen to folks and you understand the statistics, the rate of suicide ideation and an actual attempted suicide among LGBTQ youth is much higher than their counterparts. And so this was a really important service to provide, and it had some real success until out of nowhere on the third anniversary of fielding the 988 hotline, the Trump administration announced that they were just going to discontinue the LGBTQ pilot program. Now, I want to be really, really clear. If you are in a mental health crisis, if you are contemplating suicide, regardless of whether you're LGBTQ or not, still call 988. There's somebody who's going to answer that call. There's somebody who's going to reply to that text. We're going to fight to restore the specialized services for the LGBTQ community. But in the meantime, the 988 hotline is still there, and you should still use it if you're experiencing a mental health crisis. In the meantime, we've got to convince the Trump administration and fight to restore these services so that really you can have your call responded to by somebody who gets the journey that you're going through in life.
Thank you for being such a strong advocate on this issue and for this program. For those of you who are not familiar, what excuse or reason does the Trump administration or members backing the ending of this program have? Because we know this program saves lives.
Yeah, so basically the Trump administration said they ran out of money in this pilot program. And, it's absolutely absurd to say that. When we set up 988, we knew that there was going to be much greater demand for services because people would know the number to call in a crisis. And so we made it very clear to the department that administers it that should they run out of the funding necessary to answer these calls right away, you don't want to be put on hold when you're contemplating suicide. You do not want to say, we'll call you back in 20 minutes. You need somebody to answer right away. And so there was always flexibility in the department to move money around to make sure that these calls were being answered in a very expeditious, timely manner. And not only that, after the crisis part subsided, that there were going to be funded community organizations to refer people to for follow-up in their home communities. And all of that was contemplated when we created the 988 hotline and funded. And so the Trump administration knows better. They could have moved funding around. That flexibility was always built in. They just have it out for the LGBTQ community. We've seen it in policy after policy, funding cut after funding cut. They included in their woke agenda, anti-woke agenda. They included in their anti-DEI. They included in all sorts of things. And so people who are part of the LGBTQ community have felt this unrelenting assault since the first day of the Trump administration and all the executive orders he signed and all the institutions that support diversity being under attack. And so, yeah, people have felt it. And there's no wonder that there's more despair, more depression or isolation when you see somebody who's so powerful just going after a vulnerable group of Americans. And we need to fight back. We need to use our voices and we need to stand up and we need to fight back.
The pro-life party feels like they are never interested in funding programs that help support people's lives. Thank you so much for sitting and talking with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.